Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. In India, thousands of protesters are demanding the withdrawal of the citizenship law, which is being seen as anti-Muslim. Authorities have deployed riot police in several states to curb the protests.
The UP government has suspended internet services in 21 districts and has detained hundreds. UP police said it had arrested over 100 people while reporting almost 20,000 social media accounts. Meanwhile, officials confirmed a Norwegian tourist was asked to leave India for participating in an anti-government rally. 25 people have been killed in the violent protests so far, with 19 deaths in UP. Officials say over 1,000 people have been arrested, while over 5,000 are in preventive detentions.
Well, China has called on India and Pakistan to exercise restraint and avoid taking actions that could escalate tensions. Speaking to reporters in Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Gang Shuang says the two countries should settle their disputes peacefully. Tensions between India and Pakistan increased after New Delhi stripped occupied Kashmir of its special status on the 5th of August.
We have noted relevant reports and are concerned about the current situation. As a common neighbor of India and Pakistan, China calls on both sides to exercise restraint, refrain from taking actions that escalate military tensions, peacefully resolve disputes through dialogue, and jointly safeguard regional peace and stability.
Moving on to Afghanistan, where the People's Peace Movement claims Taliban have released its 27 members kidnapped on Thursday. The organization's members were abducted while they were traveling from Herat to the Farah Road. The body's spokesman, Bismillah Watan Dost, said the activists were released without any harm. The PPM accused Taliban of abduction. There has not been any comment from the Taliban yet. The group have previously accused the movement of being financed by the Afghan government. The Philippines banned two U.S. senators from visiting the country for proposing sanctions against it over the jailing of a leading opposition leader. President spokesman Salvador Pinello said the Philippines will introduce visa restrictions for Americans if the U.S. pushes ahead with the sanctions. Senators Richard Durbin and Patrick Leahy were banned from entering the country after introducing a provision in the 2020 U.S. budget that would prevent officials involved in jailing of Senator Leila de Lima from entering the U.S. De Lima is one of the highest-profile critics of Rodrigo Duterte's controversial war on drugs. She has been imprisoned since February 2017 over a drug charge. De Lima denies charges against her. In the Philippines, the death toll from Typhoon Phanphone has risen to 28 after it hit the central parts of the country on Christmas. Rescue officials say over 40,000 people are in temporary shelters, while just under 200,000 are affected. Officials said some of the deaths were caused by falling trees, electrocution, or drowning. They said 12 people are missing, while over 2,000 homes have been damaged. Officials said more than 100 flights were cancelled and thousands of people are stranded by the suspension of ferries. It is this year's seventh typhoon to hit the Southeast Asian country with winds of 150 kilometers per hour. In Hong Kong, police say they arrested at least 336 people during the three-day of Christmas protests. In a statement, police condemned the violence that took place at Christmas holiday. It said 13 police officers were injured during this period, but the statement defended the use of the force against protesters who marched through shopping malls to disrupt business. The protest started in June against plans to allow extradition to mainland China. The bill was withdrawn in September, but demonstrations continue and now demand full democracy and inquiry into police actions. In Israeli embattled Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wins a landslide victory in the leadership primary of his right-wing Likud party. The Prime Minister won over 72% of the votes against 28% for challenger Gideon Sa'ar, who announced the primary challenge after Netanyahu's indictment. Netanyahu called it a huge win and pledged to emerge victorious in the March 2 general election. Likud and the centrist Blue and White Party are deadlocked after elections in both April and September. neither side was able to command a parliamentary majority under Israel's system of proportional representation. Last month, Israel's Attorney General indicted the Prime Minister for fraud, bribery, and breach of trust over a series of corruption allegations. Japan says it will send a warship and patrol planes to protect its key shipping lane in the Middle East. The cabinet approved the plan, saying the period of deployment will be 1 year. Under the plan, a helicopter-equipped destroyer and 2 P-3C patrol planes will be dispatched. They will be used for information gathering aimed at ensuring safe passage for the Japanese vessels through the region. In case of emergencies, a special order will be issued by the Japanese Defense Minister to allow the forces to use weapons to protect ships. Earlier this year, there were several attacks on international merchant vessels, including a Japanese-owned tanker in the region. Twelve people have been killed and at least 16 injured as a plane carrying 98 crashed near Almaty Airport. Aviation officials say the aircraft went down shortly after takeoff, and emergency services are working to rescue the survivors. Officials say the back air plane lost altitude during takeoff and broke through a concrete fence before hitting a building. Kazakhstan's Interior Ministry says 6 children were among those dead. Almaty Airport officials said 22 people suffered severe injuries and were taken to 2 hospitals. A special commission is investigating the circumstances leading to the deadly incident. Nearly 300 migrants have been rescued off the coast of Spain over the 2-day Christmas period. Spain's Maritime Rescue Service said over half of those were found off the Costa Blanca on Spain's southeastern coast. Rescue officials said about 200 refugees and migrants were rescued off the coast of Spain on the first day of Christmas, while nearly 100 were rescued on the second day in separate operations off the coast of Spain and Morocco. The International Organization for Migration says at least 1,250 migrants died in an attempt to reach Europe so far this year. The United Nations has rejected Russia's allegations of turning a blind eye over U.S. visa delays. Spokesman Stefan Dujarric said Secretary General and the UN Legal Council have repeatedly conveyed their concerns to the host country. Dujarric said Secretary General Antonio Guterres has communicated the matter with Washington. Moscow accuses Washington of deliberately delaying visa issuance to Russian officials traveling to the UN headquarters in New York. Responding, the U.S. said it reserves the right to exclude individuals in certain limited cases, including UN sessions. In Niger, 14 troops have been killed after heavily armed militants ambushed a convoy in the western Tillabéri region. In a statement, Interior Ministry said 7 police and 7 National Guards were killed and 1 guard is missing after a fierce battle. The Interior Ministry said militants suffered many losses. It said militants attacked as security forces were escorting a voter registration team in Sanam district ahead of the legislative elections in 2020. The statement said the team was secured and returned to Sanam safe and sound. Niger's troops are fighting Boko Haram militants on the southeast border with Nigeria and ISIS militants in the west near Mali. In Libya, 2 people have been killed in an airstrike by the eastern forces on a shopping area near the capital Tripoli. Officials said the airstrike hit a pharmacy and a bakery, injuring 20 others. The mayor of Zawiya, Jamal Bahir, said the airstrike took place on a busy day ahead of the weekend. Tensions have spiked in recent weeks as Turkey said it could send troops to support the UN-backed government. Libya has been divided between 2 main camps, the Government of National Accord and a rival administration in the country's east, backed by Khalifa Haftar. Ivory Coast former rebel leader and presidential candidate Guillaume Soro can be facing life imprisonment over allegedly plotting a coup. Public prosecutor Richard Edu said the authorities have issued an arrest warrant for Soro for amassing weapons.
Adu said penalty for attempting a plot against state security is a life sentence. He said over 15 people have been arrested in connection with the investigation that includes charges of money laundering.
Some people close to him did not hesitate to discredit the institutions in place. These acts, far from being isolated, were part of conspiracy which were to lead to a civil and military insurrection.
Soros forces installed President Alassane Ouattara during a civil war that followed the 2010 elections.
Mexico has asked the International Court of Justice to mediate its diplomatic dispute with Bolivia. Mexico City granted asylum to 9 former officials of ousted President Evo Morales' government. Mexico's Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard said he expected The Hague to uphold Mexico's right to give asylum. Ebrard said Bolivian authorities have refused to issue safe conduct passes to the asylum seekers. He claimed the consensus of the international community is on Mexico's side in the dispute. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador compared Bolivia's threats to that of former Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet.
We hope that the right to asylum will be reconsidered and that any temptation to take or violate our sovereignty by wanting to penetrate our embassy, the Mexican embassy in Bolivia, is removed. Not even Pinochet did that.
Pakistan has observed the 12th death anniversary of first elected women Prime Minister of the country. A large public gathering was held at Rawalpindi's Liaquat Park to pay homage to the Pakistan People's Party leader. She was assassinated in a gun and bomb attack at the same venue in 2007. The Pakistan Aeronautical Complex has achieved a milestone by launching the first batch of 8 dual-seat GF-17 aircraft at its headquarters in Kamra. The project was completed with assistance from China's National Aero Technology Import and Export Corporation. To mark this momentous occasion, a grand ceremony was held at the aircraft manufacturing factory in Kamra. Addressing the ceremony, Pakistan's Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Mujahid Anwar Khan said GF-17 Thunder is the backbone of the Air Force. He congratulated the staff on the successful accomplishment of the 2019 production target and completing first 8 dual-seat GF-17 aircraft. Chinese Ambassador Yao Jing said the GF-17 is a testimony to Pakistan-China friendship and mutual cooperation. Japan has revised a roadmap for the tsunami-wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant cleanup. The amended plan will delay removal of the thousands of spent fuel units that remain in cooling pools since 2011 disaster. Over 4,000 units of fuel rods inside the melted reactors can melt and release massive radiations. Over 1 million tons of radioactive water in nearly 1,000 tanks can harm local fishing and the farming industry. Removing just under 900 tons of molten fuel from the melted reactors remains the toughest challenge. Government says Fukushima's cleanup can cost up to $200 billion, with over 10,000 workers needed annually. Tokyo Electric Power Company maintains that the decommissioning will be completed in 30 to 40 years. In Australia, uncontrolled bushfires are still burning after ripping through the state's prominent wine region and around the country's largest city, Sydney. Hazardous smoke blanketed Sydney, heightening public anger and raising political pressure on the government to do more to curb climate change. More in this report.
Australian wildfires are threatening Sydney's water supplies ahead of a heat wave as the authorities scramble to protect water plants. The authorities are focusing to protect pumping stations, pipes, and other infrastructures from intense bushfires surrounding Sydney. Temperatures rose above 40 degrees Celsius in parts of South Australia, marking the start of a new wave of heat in the continent's south. The state's ambulance service said they have attended to hundreds of patients with heat-related conditions since December.
We're very focused on A, trying to bring that fire under control, prioritising the threat to life and property, but we're also very mindful about the implications of fire burning in the catchment area, what that means when it does rain again, what sort of runoff will there be, what sort of siltation will there be, ash, soil, all that sort of stuff getting into the waterways.
Temperatures in New South Wales state are forecast to head back towards 40 degrees Celsius next week, fueling fires near Warragamba Dam. The dam is at lesser than half the capacity amid prolonged droughts. It provides water to about 80% of Sydney's 5 million residents.
We are seeing the temperatures starting to rise over the coming days. We're seeing this heat wave starting to move across New South Wales again. That's going to bring not just the heat out of the centre of Australia, we're going to see the temperatures up into the low to mid 40s across a lot of areas.
The bushfires have destroyed over 4 million hectares across the country, dwarfing the terrain burned by fierce fires in California during 2019.
China says the U.S. Space Force severely threatens global strategic stability. Speaking to reporters in Beijing, Defense Ministry spokesperson Wu Xian said the force will undermine peace and security of the outer space. Trump signed the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020 last week. The act directs the establishment of the U.S. Space Force as the sixth branch of the armed forces. Wu said Beijing is against a possible arms race in the outer space.
The United States move to form the Space Force under the pretext of the so-called military threat from other countries in an attempt to seek absolute military superiority in the outer space. The move can easily trigger an arms race in the outer space, greatly undermine peace and security of outer space, and severely threaten global strategic stability. We firmly oppose it.
严重威胁太空的
New Yorkers are used to seeing rats on the street, but they are not always small. Sometimes they are inflatable and taller than giraffes. American unions use giant balloon rodents as a protest symbol, parking them outside company offices to highlight labor disputes. More on such symbolic protests in this report.
A different kind of rat on the streets of New York City. Giant balloons like this one are parked outside construction sites or company headquarters to draw attention to labor disputes.
People that's in the public, they stop and they want to know what's going on. So it's a great tool to actually bring folks aware of what's going on. And when they ask a question, that's when we utilize that moment to educate them on the purpose of the rat and why we're here.
Inflatable rats were first used in the state of Illinois and started becoming a familiar sight for New Yorkers in the late 90s. But several court cases have threatened their use over the years, describing it as unlawful picketing.
Greedy people love to hide in the background and don't really want others to know that they're acting in a vein of greed, but when we expose that vein of greed, they're shamed by it. So it just irritates commerce, it irritates capital, it irritates really barons of capital, and we're going to continue to expose those folks.
One of the latest cases involved labor union Local 79. They used rats to protest against the construction of a supermarket using non-union workers. A New York judge sided with them, maintaining previous rulings saying the rat is protected by the First Amendment. But the legal battle is still going on. The Labor Board has refused to comment on the issue. As for the rat, it's still out there. Labor unions are determined to defend it and continue to take it to any place where they see injustice.
Lows on the highs of the business world now. US and European stock markets climb after the festive break and a mixed showing across Asia. The pound gained against the dollar and euro after EU chief Ursula von der Leyen voiced concern on whether the bloc can conclude a post-Brexit trade deal with Britain by the end of the next year. In stocks, London's benchmark FTSE 100 index was up 0.4% compared with the close a day before Christmas. Frankfurt's DAX 30 index and the Paris CAC also advanced. Wall Street opened at another record high as optimism over US-China trade relations boosted investor sentiment. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose nearly 54 points, while the Nasdaq Composite gained 27 points. Asian stock markets closed mixed, following another strong lead from Wall Street, where tech stocks won big with strong Christmas results. Japan's manufacturing activity has slipped for the second straight month in November due to reduction in demand. Official data showed factory output fell nearly 1% in November from October, a slightly slower decline than the forecast. Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry data showed production was pushed down by a decrease in output of production machinery and information equipment. Japan's retail sales also dropped over 2% in November as consumer sentiment stayed depressed after October's sales tax hike. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.